There it is.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We
Good
have
evening.
another session of Mellow Musings. I would request everyone to mute themselves. And once the speaker starts speaking, then maybe you can switch off your videos and switch them on again and whenever you want to speak or whenever you want to ask a question, right? Okay, so welcome back to this session, Mellow Musings. One more session today, and we have a very interesting speaker lined up. This is Neelesh Kulkarni. Neelesh is a management graduate, an entrepreneur, theatre and voiceover artist, cricket commentator, corporate coach, poet, and best-selling author. What's left out, Neelesh? What's left out? Huh?
Prime Minister of India.
You, oh, well, that's something to look forward to. And incidentally, he has a great sense of humor, as you will discover very soon. It was just the other day, when he launched his first book, In the Footsteps of Rama, Travels with the Ramayana. Just the other day. And within this, what seems to be just one day, he's been so prolific that he's brought out book after book, and all of them are bestsellers. I wish you could tell us your secret, Neelesh.
Rest
Really.
assured, I won't.
So yes, the first book was In the Footsteps of Rama,
Yes.
which has sold over 25,000 copies. Oh my God, how do you manage it? Now, this has been translated into Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati. It's been made into a web series and has won the FICCI. What is the FICCI? Best Non-Fiction Book of the Year Award for 2024. The
Yes.
second book was an anthology called Where the Gods Dwell, and the third, a children's book for Westland. Now you can see that he's been working in different genres. And this fourth book, which we are going to discuss today, this is called The Uprising. I'll just tell you about it. And it was released in August, and it's going to be made into a movie. Neelesh, hats off to you. There is a fifth book also that is being published by HarperCollins. It seems to be seamless. One book after another, one book after another. Right?
Just a coincidence.
And
Series of coincidences.
So let's talk about the uprising. This is about the liberation of Dadra and Nagar Haveli. Dadra and Nagar Haveli. And for the first time, it tells the true story of how in 1954, a handful of young men from Pune and Goa combined forces with local residents and threw out over 300 fully armed Portuguese and liberated the territories. Before you joined us, Neelesh, we were talking about the 61 Goa liberation. And
Right.
my father, incidentally, was part of that liberation also. He was in the army, and I remember him coming back and telling us, "Oh, hum to chale lam pe." Lam is another word for war.
Yes.
Hum to
Yes.
chale lam pe. And my mother was in tears. So what you're talking about was much before that. The
7 years.
liberation of Dadra and Nagar Haveli. Yeah.
1954.
Now, this is a book with a difference. It tells a story with a difference in the sense that I was talking to Neelesh the other day, and he says that writing about a historical episode is a little difficult because you have to make it interesting enough for the reader to pick it up and enjoy it. How do you do that? So Neelesh is going to tell us about it. We are going to be talking to him. But before we begin a discussion, Neelesh, would you like to say something to our audience? We have about 37 people logged in and more may come.
And my Samdhi of 20 years, Dr. Vijay Sharma was a member of Mello for many, many years. And I've been hearing
He
about
was a
Mello, about
founder
your
member.
conferences.
He was
He
a
was a founder
founder
member. Yes,
member.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. So he's been a friend
Was
for a good 25, 30 years. And then my daughter and his son got married and we became relatives, but continued to be friends fundamentally. So I've been hearing a lot about Mello for many, many years. And I'm so thankful to Manju for having invited me and taking that connect forward. So that's the opening
Yeah,
statement.
but Nilesh, it's very surprising because I did not take the connect forward because of
No, no, I know that
Vijay,
quite well. I know we clicked,
was
and it's
it was just by chance one of
yes,
those
yes,
literature festivals when I saw you talking
yes,
about your
yes,
first book. I thought,
yes.
you know, you would be a good specimen to have in our literature festival. And you were.
God, being
And the
specimenized
Vijay,
at 70.
yeah, Vijay connection we discovered much later.
Yes,
And
we
of
did.
course,
Yes, we
Vijay
did.
was
When we
a
were
very
talking about it
treasured
in
friend.
Pune, if you
Yeah,
remember, at
yeah.
Manjari's festival, that fest, that is when we discovered the connection with we had through Vijay. So that's how it happened. So
Mhm.
now we can get on with the main thing.
Yes, yes. So, what is the book about? Can you give us a brief overview?
Yeah. See, the Portuguese were the first to come to India, that is 1498, and they were the last to leave in 1961. So when we say that we got independence in 1947, what we actually mean is that we got independence from the British. The whole country was still not free because the French were there in Pondicherry, they were there in Chandarnagar, Karakal, a couple of places, and the states of Hyderabad, Junagadh, and Kashmir had not merged into the union. So some parts of the country were trying to be independent, still others were under French domination, and they were the Portuguese who controlled Goa, Daman, Diu, Dadra, and Nagar Haveli. Five almost contiguous areas. With Diu was the farthest away; it's about 700 kilometers from Silvassa, which is the capital of Dadra and Nagar Haveli. So after 48, because of Sardar Patel's work, Kashmir joined the Indian Union. The Nawab of Junagadh fled to Pakistan, and Junagadh merged with India. And Hyderabad was annexed by what is called police action, which was actually the military going in, disarming the Razakars and the Hyderabadi army, and merging the state with India. The French went by negotiation in between somewhere between 48 and 52, but the Portuguese just refused to go. Now, this was so because the Portuguese had passed a law in their parliament by which they defined Portugal as a multi-continent, multi-location country, which meant that the colonies like Dadra, Nagar Haveli, Goa, Daman, Diu, their Indian possessions, were not possessions. They were Portugal itself. They were districts of Portugal. And Portugal was a member of NATO. Therefore, the Indian army, if it had invaded Goa, Daman, Diu, Dadra, Nagar Haveli, it would have meant that it was invading Portugal itself, and the NATO countries could have retaliated. Therefore, the government of India did not do anything about it from 1947 to 1961. In 1954, Pandit Nehru made a statement in Parliament in which he said that the liberation of areas under Portuguese occupation is the responsibility of the people living in it. And neither the Indian government nor the Indian people will have anything to do with it. Meaning, virtually, we left those people to their own. We said, तुम हमारे नहीं हो, तुमको जो करना है वो अपने आप करो भैया, हम कुछ नहीं करेंगे इसके अंदर. Now, this uh, this is something which greatly annoyed a couple of people. One small group of boys in Pune and one small group of boys from Goa who had fled from Goa because there were warrants of arrest and threats of death against them. And they were settled down in Bangalore, in Belgaum, as what is called the Azad Gomantak Dal. Now, these two groups of young men, all between the ages of 18 and 23, decided that there was no point in talking so much about independence of the country if a large section of our population, fairly numerous, fairly large number of people of our population, were still under foreign rule. Therefore, they decided to take their matters in their own hand and raised funds, bought armaments, and some 20, 23 of them, at max 29 of them, attacked Dadra and Nagar Haveli, which is an area somewhere between Gujarat and Maharashtra as of now, which was in the center of the Dvibhashik state at that time. That means Maharashtra, Gujarat was combined with two languages spoken in it. So they attacked this area, and in a campaign which started as a concept in February 1954, ended in August 1954 by driving away 375 fully armed Portuguese soldiers. So, this is the amazing story of bravery and courage of a small group of young men who carried out what is the only successful people-led armed struggle in the history of the Indian freedom movement, and also the only successful armed struggle waged ever anywhere in the world against the Portuguese. This is such a significant event. So this book is about this, and it's a surprise that so many years after the event occurred, nobody has written about it as yet. There are bits and pieces of information available in government records, in newspaper clippings, in personal memoirs, but there is no book which covered all aspects of this. And I think I was blessed in that I was able to bring this out into the public domain.
Where did you do your research? You must have had so much of work to do.
Yes, yes, quite very much. Uh, there were three kinds of sources. See, you've seen my first, you've read my first book also, Manju. You are aware of the fact that I do not believe in saying anything which I am not able to substantiate or corroborate with independent research. So research features very heavily in my book. All my books I write. So when people ask me how long does it take you to write a book, I say the actual writing takes 6 months. From thought to finish takes 3.5 years because I need to research a lot. So part of the research was through people who had participated in the struggle. They are all in
Mhm.
their 90s. And the tragedy is that when I started researching, there were 16 of them. As of date, there are only two alive. And they are all
Mhm.
in their mid 90s, 92, 93. So it was their memoirs. It was original documents that they have with them. For instance, the book has original maps which they actually drew when they wanted to go from one place to the other, marking out the places where they wanted to go. It has original pictures taken at that moment of time when they had invaded and taken pictures of every police chowki they had liberated. So a lot of
Mhm.
original documents came from the people who had participated in the struggle. So that was one. Now there were three groups which participated in this. There was a group of RSS volunteers from Pune. There was a group from the Azad Gomantak Dal, which was an offshoot of the Goa Congress, which is more or less modeled on the Indian National Congress. And the Azad Gomantak Dal you can look at as the breakaway faction which probably Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose led, which believed that taking up arms was the solution and an unarmed struggle was not going to get any results. So there was the Azad Gomantak Dal, and there were the Varlis led by the communists. One Godavari Parulekar was doing a lot of work amongst them, and she led them into one part of the liberation. So there are three groups. For the groups in Pune and Goa, there were people to be contacted. There were people I could contact. And they had memoirs and they had documents and they had newspaper clippings and they had government reports, which if you look back at if I can turn the camera to the rest of my book rack, this is the thick stack of documents that I actually have, which were given by these gentlemen to me from time to time. The most
Mhm.
difficult part of the research was uh, looking at what the Warli tribals of the local area did. That was very difficult because the Warlis had no written records. They had they had no documents with them. They had nothing. So I had to actually locate the Warlis who had participated in the conflict. Now there was a problem of language. There was a problem of locating them. They were not in the public eye anywhere. They were not on the net. They were not anywhere. So I and my wife actually walked into in the jungles of Silvassa for 5 days, going from pada to pada, that is from small village to small village, asking people ki chauvan mein kaun kaun tha iske andar. So ultimately we located three people over 90 who had participated, and in their mix of Warli language and Marathi, they told me the story. So I was able to put that together. So there was a lot of documents, there were a lot of memoirs talking to people, and there was a lot of field work involved in it. Of course, I went to all the police chowkis, I went to all the thanas, I went to the bridges, I took a look at what was there. I went to the distillery that was there in the way, all the places that were connected. So it was a mixture of documents, memoirs,
Mhm.
and fieldwork. All these put together make the book, which is why I was very particular, and my publisher Kartika was very particular about this. That everything you say in the book must be corroborated, because the story
Mhm.
of 20 people beating back 375 is so obviously filmy
Mhm.
that I won't blame anybody for thinking it is a lie.
Mhm.
You'll have to bear with this in between. So therefore, everything.
What is the
There
title
is a
of the movie
particular.
going to be? Because the Uprising. How do you translate that?
This is something over which we have very little control. Once the
Mhm.
author signs away the rights to the movie, the only thing he can insist on is that the plot not be changed radically, and that every change
Mhm.
in the plot would have to be okayed by me. Beyond that, there is
Mhm.
nothing we have in control. Who stars in it,
Mhm.
how does it look, and all is something which we have no control over. So I do not know what it will be called.
Okay.
But I'll
You
keep
just
Mellow
hand over
posted as
your
and when it
baby.
comes out.
You just hand over your baby and hope that it turns out well.
Yes, quite so, quite so, quite so. Without that, there's not much you can do about it. Because again, they have their own way of looking at it. They say that you spent,
Mhm.
say, a couple of lakh rupees on getting the book out, you and the publisher. We're going to spend a couple of crores. So we
Yeah.
have a right to look at it in a way by which people who see it. And your interest in
Mhm.
it becoming a movie is again not that it stays in the cans, but that people watch
Right.
it. Therefore, whatever is necessary in the interest of the movie, one would like
Mm.
that to be done, including the name or maybe the stars or the way they look at it. Sometimes they can even decide to not twist the plot, but skew the plot slightly towards one person or one group.
Mhm.
That's a choice that they have to make, as long as they don't deviate in fact from my book, because the book is my baby. So I am very keen that the baby at least stay in the form in which it was created. There's an interesting story behind it. When I was writing the book, when the first draft went to my agent and I sent it across, he read it and said, स्टोरी तो बहुत अच्छी है, इसकी पिक्चर बनेगी. तो ऐसा कर कि तू इसमें ना थोड़े से ऐसे सिचुएशन डाल दे कि किसी की अभी शादी हुई है, वो फिर वहां से आया है लड़ाई करने के लिए, हिज वाइफ इज पाइनिंग फॉर हिम, ताकि पीछे से मतलब इसके ऊपर गाना वाना डालने की स्कोप हो जाए. यू मेक अ स्क्रिप्ट लाइक दैट एंड आई अश्योर यू विल सेल इट फॉर अ गुड अमाउंट.
Did
So I
you?
no, no, I flatly refused. I flatly refused to change the text because
कोई रोमांस नहीं डाला आपने?
बिल्कुल जीरो मैम, जीरो मैम, बिल्कुल जीरो, बिल्कुल जीरो रोमांस, जिल्च एकदम. शायद फीमेल
Okay.
कैरेक्टर्स के लिए जगह भी नहीं है बहुत, एक्सेप्ट गोदावरी पारुलेकर, एक्सेप्ट फॉर द leader of the Warli tribals, except for the tribals who fought. There's no scope. I not only did that, there was a reason behind it. Reason is that these 90-year-olds who I chased for 1.5 years in order to get their confidence and faith, imposed that faith in me by giving me all that they had. And they said, इसको ले लो और जैसे चाहे लिख लो. I would have been letting them down very badly if I had trivialized their struggle, something for which they had not spoken for so many, about which they had not spoken for so many years. So I just refused to do that. And as a result, I changed the agent, I changed the publisher, had a different agent, went to a different publisher, and brought out the book exactly as I wanted. Because Westland Books and Kartika were not only in tune with what my thought process was, they were more
Mhm.
insistent that I should make sure that every line I write, I am able to verify if I'm questioned. And today I'm proud
Mhm.
to say that there are 274 citations in the book. And through them, I will be able to corroborate every single sentence that has been written in it. The challenge was to do this and yet keep it very readable, very interesting, reading like a story. But somewhere along the line, it clicked and I was able to do it.
That's so interesting. Have you been a history student?
I haven't economics and management.
Okay. How does that gel with the historical research that you've done?
How
Must
does
have been
how
very
does
difficult.
how does reading Valmiki Ramayana and Adhyatmik Ramayana and all gel with what background I have? I've never studied Sanskrit
Oh,
formally.
because
It's
yeah,
just
but
something
then
you
that
need to
is
do.
part of the ethos. That's part of the ethos. You grow up hearing
Yes,
those
yes,
stories.
yes, yes. But
And
when you,
why? I'm wondering, why did you choose Dadar and Nagar Haveli? There were so
I didn't
many
choose it.
other battles going on, so many
Uh,
other struggles.
there were so many struggles. The armed struggle has been a consistent a pattern over the years in which the freedom struggle has been fought. I think if you actually
Mhm.
go from the Kakori Hatyakand or Bhagat Singh, or you go to the Indian National Army or Surya Sen in the Chittagong Uprising, right up to the 1946 Sailor Uprising, there is a regular stream of uh, armed struggles which have been taken place parallel to the Gandhian movement. And both of them have actually combined together in order to make India ungovernable for the British. So there were so many of them. But A, this was not written about. So I wanted to write about it. B, most importantly, I didn't choose the story chose me because I was traveling to Nasik in a train for my previous book,
Mhm.
researching my previous book. And seated across me was a elderly gentleman with his son, and they were speaking Marathi. I was speaking Marathi, so we got talking about kahan se aaye, kya hua type. And when I asked him what he was doing, why they had come to Delhi, the son said my father was a freedom fighter. So I said, was he with Gandhi? He said, नहीं गांधी नहीं, मेरे पिताजी ने तो बंदूक उठाई थी. So I
Hmm.
asked him, बंदूक किसने उठाई भाई, कहाँ? Was he in the naval uprising? Because that's the only age group that seems to fit. He said, नहीं नहीं, दादरा नगर हवेली, about which I knew as little as anybody else knows today. So I asked him more about it, and he told me the basic story from the Pune point of view. So then I started chasing them. I told them I wanted to write about it. They did not have the faith. They thought कि लोग आते जाते रहते हैं, documents ले जाते हैं, वापस भी नहीं करते, लिखता विखता कुछ है नहीं. So after almost an year of chasing, by which time my first book came out, they gave me their documents, in which I discovered that there was something. There was a role that the Goans played. When I asked Uncle Arvind Uncle, who is now more or less like a family elder, he said, नहीं नहीं वो ऐसे ही एक दो दिन के लिए आए थे, कुछ खास नहीं था type. Because everybody likes, they know their side of the story. So I found a name in it called Prabhakar Senari, who was the
Hmm.
leader of the Azad Gomatak Dal. And I went looking for him in Goa with just his name. Nothing else to know. I didn't have an address. I didn't know if he was still alive. But I went looking
Hmm.
for him because I had to find him to get the details. So I put out his name on all the WhatsApp groups that I knew in Goa. I gave it to a friend who put it on a lot of WhatsApp groups. And within 10 days, I got a series of phone numbers, of which Sinari Saab was one. So I spoke to him. He refused to talk. He said, okay, I've done my duty towards my country and I have no desire to talk about it. Cut phone niche. I kept calling him, kept chasing him. At the end of some 5, 6 months of calling, he said, Acha, aa jana Goa kisi time. Moment he said that, next day we landed up in Goa and started calling him from Goa. आ गए जी, अब बताओ क्या करना है. So fourth day he called me home and finally said, I mean, his exact words was, what a persistent bastard I have met today. So I'm going to give you what you want just because you've been chasing me like mad. So stop bothering me now. So he gave me a stack of documents. And those documents mentioned the Worleys, which set me on that chase in the jungles there, looking for the Worley participation. So it's a series of coincidences that have resulted in the story coming to me. So I can only say that I was meant to write it and it came to me and I wrote it. It's as simple as that.
But when you do all this, it must be costing a lot of money. What did you do about the finances? Traveling around, meeting people, and so on. Because I gather you're a full-time writer now.
No, no,
So,
I still continue to run my company. 4 hours a
oh,
day I
you
do
do.
that. 4 hours a day I
Okay.
write. Yes.
Meanwhile, the people who are listening in, if there are any questions or observations, you can put them in the chat box, and we'll take them up as and when. So don't wait for the end of the session. You can start posing your questions right away. Yes, back to you,
Yeah,
Neelesh.
this was a bit simpler because for Footsteps of Ram we traveled for almost 15 months and we were traveling 10 days a month. So we had traveled all the way from Ayodhya to Sri Lanka and back. So there the amount spent was really huge. It even exceeded the massive advance we had got for a massive for a newcomer. But for this again, I think when you've got a good publisher, the advance more or less covers your travel expenses and your publicity expenses and also I don't think one went out of pocket for that.
Okay. So tell us, you said that there were just 20 people fighting
Yes,
against about 300 armed soldiers.
yes.
How did they manage it?
They managed it
It
with
doesn't seem it doesn't seem credible, huh?
yes, a little bit of luck, a little bit of pluck, a lot
Hmm.
of preparation, and a lot of what is called ganimikawa. Marathi word is ganimikawa. This was first coined by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj for a small force taking on a much larger force by using deceit, surprise, you know, knowledge of local terrain, local contact network, using all these put together to launch an attack on a much bigger force and defeating them. Now, this was the concept that they had at the back of their mind, which they used extensively. They gathered a lot of intelligence. They prepared the details of what was going to be done, where and when in elaborate detail. They used a lot of ruses and they had a lot of pluck. I can just tell you one, which is that when they at first attacked this thing. See, the concept of the attack was sometime in January, February 1954. And the actual attack started with Dadra being liberated in July 1954. And the attack on Nagar Haveli, see, when we say Dadra and Nagar Haveli, we tend to think they are two equal provinces. They are not. Dadra is only two villages. and Nagar Haveli is 70 villages. So that is a much bigger part. And the two are separated by a strip of land which is India. Even then was India. So when they started attacking, they started taking a lot of chote chote chowkis. And in the beginning, they had only 5 rifles and 3 pistols from what little money they were able to raise. And I'll talk about how they raised the money a bit later. With this, they captured a lot of small police chowkis. कहीं 12 लोग थे, कहीं 6 लोग थे, कहीं 8 लोग थे. They attacked them and captured them. This is also an act of bravery because you've got 8 newcomers who have hardly fired a weapon in their life attacking trained soldiers. But with bravado, raw courage, risk taking, everything put together, and their dedication to the mission, they were able to capture a lot of choti chowkis. But when they finally reached Silvassa, which is the capital of Dadra and Nagar Haveli, they found that the captain there, his name was Captain Fidaldo, he was the administrator. What he had done was that he had become very scared because these people were cutting communication lines everywhere. So he had no idea how many people were attacking. All he knew was that one police post after another was falling. So he thought there was a huge army invading. So what he had done was that he gathered all his soldiers into the Silvassa police post. And there were almost 275 soldiers there inside. So when these people reached near the police post, they realized that the police post was heavily sandbagged. There were carbines poking out from behind the sandbags. And if they attacked from the front, the 23, 24, 27 people there at that time would have got shot down in as many seconds or even less. Therefore, they decided to play a ruse. What they did was, 2 of them rushed back to Pune. They went from hostel to hostel, akhada to akhada, shakha to shakha, and said, देश का काम है, 2 दिन के लिए आना है, अब भी चलना है, जान भी जा सकती है, किसी को नहीं बताना क्या है, चलेंगे क्या. सिर्फ इस बात पर more than 100 students got ready, and they were transported to Silvassa in trucks, trains, whatever method they could. So outside Silvassa, in a place called Piparia, there were these 100 plus people camped. Well, what do you do with these 100 plus people? Pardon the cough, Manju. What do you do with them? They've never fired a knife. So they were given simple canisters and Diwali ke patake. They were divided into sections of 25 each. Each was led by one original people with a pistol, and they were told that the moment your leader fires a pistol in the air, you have to burst these crackers in those canisters, so that there's a lot of dum dum dhadam dhadam sound coming from all sides, and you have to shout slogans. So now 12 of these people, this started the previous night, and it went on through the night. Slogan shouting, bursting, and that they discovered that the sound of a pataka being burst in a canister was exactly like that of a 303 rifle being fired. So what the captain thought was, कि इतनी बड़ी फौज आ गई है with so much ammunition that they are able to just fire in the air all night, and they are not bothered about ammunition getting burst. So a huge force has come. Therefore, he took 175 of his men and withdrew behind the police post on the other side of a river that was flowing between them, and left only 75 people there. Still, that's sizable. 20 rifles, 22 rifles they had by now against 75 soldiers. So 12 of these, who were the best marksmen who had fired before, went to the rear of the police station. From a fire escape, went up to the top and signaled to these hundreds surrounding the police chowki. And the moment that signal went down, that entire cracker bursting and firing in the air started. So these people were so badly demoralized that the 75 who were there were continuously looking at the front and firing at random into the jungle, thinking, "Pata nahi kitne log aa rahe." Meanwhile, these 12 jumped from the roof into the first floor balcony. They bayoneted one person, they cut off the hand of another, shot one, disarmed the 9 guards who were guarding the rear, and rushed into this main chamber from behind. And while they were doing so, one of them went and opened the rear door of the police chowki, and these 100 who were bursting crackers started shouting and entered from behind. So these 75 were so overwhelmed that they thought कि शायद इतने सारे लोग बंदूकें लेके अंदर घुस आए हैं. Then they put their weapons down and surrendered. Only 2 of them fought back, and both were shot. So look at this. This is so much pluck. There's so much risk taking. There's so much, you know, this is the rules which they played, and it worked very successfully. And Silvassa was surrendered, and the first police station was under their occupation. These 75 people were then arrested and sent off into Indian territory and confined to Indian barracks there. So this is the way in which they fought this battle.
Did they all survive? Or were
Come
there any
again?
casualties? Huh?
There were no casualties from this side. There were only two people who were injured. That is because a rifle went off accidentally, and there were splinters which went into one person's eye. He lost an eye. Another person lost an arm. But that besides, they did not have any casualties, which is another very surprising thing. That जैसे रजनीकांत को कभी चोट नहीं लगती, बुलेट वापस आ जाती है गन के अंदर, वैसे I guess for these guys also there were no casualties. I think the fortune favored the brave, and they were able to do what they set out to do. But this was just one part of the battle. The main battle was fought elsewhere afterwards, but we'll talk about that when we come to it.
There's somebody who wants to know, how do you verify if it is factual history or just cultural memory of the people that you interrogated?
I would like to ask that person if he actually knows where Gautam Buddha was born. Lumbini? If that's the answer that should come out. How do we know he was actually born in Lumbini? Because there is a rock edict there put up by Emperor Ashok 500 years after the Buddha was born, saying this is where the Buddha was born. We take that as ground zero, and we accept that. Isn't that actually just the cultural memory of people living in Lumbini, claiming that this is where the Buddha was born, and we accept that as historical fact and move from there? So very often we have to rely on a certain baseline. But yes, how do you verify? Because each of them was verified either against government documents or against newspaper clippings, both of which are available in a plenty. So there were a lot of newspaper clippings of that time which are available. Gujarati newspapers are there, Marathi newspapers are there. Then English newspapers, of course, mainline were there. And there were some government reports. So part of the Portuguese side of the story came from government reports, which I was able to unearth from Dadra and Nagar Haveli. So verification was there. And then again, the memories were scattered across people who had no connect with each other. Like, for instance, the 100 boys who came from Pune were there for one night and went back. 2 nights they were there, they went back. The main people who planned along with some people of the Azad Gomantak Dal. But most of the two factions met each other only at the time of the Silvassa battle. So when people from multifarious sources say the same thing in their own memoirs, and somewhere along the line that cross-verification helps establish the authenticity.
There are some more comments that have come up. The people who are listening in, see if you can send the message not to me, but directly to everyone or to the speaker. Because I did adjust the settings, but somehow the messages are coming only to me. Anyway, I'll read them out. And meanwhile,
it would be nice if you could read them out. It would be nice if you could read them out, because I will have to flit between my video and the messages, and it will distract from the narrative for me. I mean, I'm not quite comfortable.
Meanwhile, some girl, Ritushri, has got logged out automatically. She should be allowed to enter. And RS is the initial she uses for her connection. All right, Neelesh sir, this is an interesting and informative session. No wonder you're an excellent raconteur. From dry pages of history, you have woven a tapestry which is a rightful blend of documentation, field research, anecdotes, and memoirs in a way that hooks the reader in an inevitable manner. My question to you is, in the context of writing historical fiction, do you think it is a challenge to give and create motives, desires, and ambitions to the characters, to humanize the characters in a way they resonate with the readers? I must tell you that the person who's asking the question is Sunena Jain, and she's one of our scholars, a very good one, with a lot of promise. So she herself is a writer, and she's asking you this: do you humanize the characters? And if you could think about this, then there's something more coming up.
One very basic comment on this, which is that this is not historical fiction. This is historical narrative non-fiction. So there is not a word or an iota of information in this is not as actually reported or as actually which has happened.
Somebody.
Therefore, I have not tried to give any color to any character. I have let the pace of the story determine the readability. So the characters, I've not spent much time in building up the characters because I think the main character was the story itself around which it resolved. So my job as a non-fiction writer
Manju
is to
Jaidka,
report what is there.
Uh,
And so I've only reported what has
Somebody,
happened.
just 1 minute.
Yeah.
Will you please mute yourselves, the rest of you? Swastik, please mute yourself. Yes, please carry on. Sorry, Neelesh.
Yes. So this is narrative non-fiction. So the question of imputing any motives to the character or to imputing any feelings to them or trying to build up their past has not been done. Only what has happened has been reported. So you will not find any character saying, I thought that. No. Well, how do I know what he thought? It's only about I did this and I did that.
Yeah.
So the entire book, the readability is maintained by the sheer pace of the book and not by the depth of the characters, which is the hallmark of any good fiction fiction uh, book which is historical fiction. So this is not fiction. This is non-fiction, and it's merely reporting what has happened.
But
The
you must
challenge
have
was to
got so
report.
involved with it. You must have got so involved with it. Did you get so involved with it? Did you start identifying yourself with one of the characters by any chance?
I would have loved to, but no. I by and large, I'm a not only a persistent bastard, I'm also a very unemotional bastard. So I don't get involved in things so easily. I think I quite
Okay.
didn't. No, I was I was in
Somebody,
I was in awe of the characters. I was definitely in awe of the characters for trying to do something which is so obviously impossible, for having the courage to take up something without any governmental support, without any money available, without any knowledge of arms and ammunition, and yet going and doing this. I was in awe of the characters, but I don't think it translated into my getting in any way involved with them. No.
Mhm. Uh, then there is this person called Shinjini who wants you to elaborate on the role of Godavari Parulekar in the liberation of Dadra Nagar Haveli, her role
Shortly,
in the
shortly.
Worldly Uprising, and her work among the Worldly people in Thane, in places
Yeah,
such
yeah, yeah.
as the Hanu and Thalasari.
Yeah, yeah.
All her work is legendary, but could you kindly
Yes,
talk about the connection between the Worldly movement and the uprising
I'll
in
do that. I'll
Dadra
do
and
that.
Nagar Haveli? Well,
It,
Shinjini
since
apparently
you,
knows something about this. Yeah.
it's a biography that I referred to for most of the references for this. And yes, she has done a lot of work in Thane district. All this was done pre-independence, and there is a lot of this tribal belt does not respect national boundaries. It moves from Silvassa, Dadra and Nagar Haveli into Thane district, running right up to the end. So she and her husband had done a lot of basic work in helping the tribals get their own right and to eliminate the massive exploitation that was unleashed upon them by the landlords over there. So this was done, and for that she was arrested. She was in jail right up to independence. She was let off in 1947, a little thereafter, and she was told that she should not enter Thane district at any cost. Subject to that, she was let off. However, she did go because she wanted to go back to the places and to the people whom she had helped so much. When on
Mhm.
one such visit, uh, she realized that the police were behind her. And if she would have been arrested, she would have gone straight back to jail and for a longish time. Therefore, the local Wardis suggested that she dress up as a Warli woman and with an old man posing as her father-in-law, walk into the uh, Portuguese occupied Warli areas. And from there, probably escape to Dadra and from Dadra escape to the rest of the country and get out of Thane district. For that purpose, she actually walked into uh, the jungles of Silvassa in 1953 sometime. And what she
Mhm.
saw there actually shocked
Mhm.
her. She realized that the kind of atrocities that were committed upon the Valli tribals by the landlords in Thane and in what was now India were nothing compared to the atrocities that were actually uh, unleashed on the tribals in the Portuguese occupied areas. Therefore, she decided to do something about it. And she started the task of organizing them for obtaining liberation. Now, these groups were actually uh, the Azad Gomantak Dal and the RSS were together. They had formed one group of people who were fighting under the banner of the Azad Gomantak Dal itself, because they wanted to bypass the Indian government's condition of no Indian ever being involved with the liberation. But she, on the other hand, fought under the Communist Party, and they entered Dadra Nagar Haveli from one side, sometime in the beginning of 1954, and started liberating one village after the other. The village of Dadra, for instance, was liberated by the United Goans. Now, the United Goans were a left-leaning group from Goa itself, who were closely allied with Godavari Parolikar. And from there onwards, they entered Nagar Haveli, and they liberated as many as 32 villages. However, these 32 villages were those which either had no policemen, or there were maybe two policemen to five villages, or one policeman for three villages. So it wasn't, they were low hanging fruits which they liberated. And their entry into Nagar Haveli was why these people were given the permission to enter and fight. Initially, the Indian government had completely sealed off Dadra and Nagar Haveli with the Indian border state reserve police, because they did not want Indians entering in it. However, the Wadlis entered because they knew all the jungle routes. When they entered, Moraji Desai, who was the chief minister of Maharashtra at that time, got very scared and rattled, because he thought that a Telangana-like situation would emerge, where the communists had taken great areas of territory and continued to de facto rule it. Therefore, he then called the Azad Gomantak Dal people and told them that tum log jana chaho to tum jao, but make sure you capture Silvassa before the communists enter. So, therefore, they were given the permission to go in. Of course, they were told that our support for you only is up to the border. Once you enter, even if you die, you will rot. We will not come to pick up your bodies. You'll have to rot there. So, therefore, they entered from one side, fought these battles, and liberated Silvassa. Now, the communists and the Warlis had a major showdown with the Portuguese a little after Silvassa was liberated. Because the captain, if you remember, I told you, had retreated to across the river. And the river was in a state of high flood. Therefore, he could not come back and liberate Silvassa. Therefore, he backed off and went off to a place called Khanvel, where
What is the
there was a
name of
police
the
post.
river? What is the name of
It
the
was
river?
called Daman Ganga. Daman Ganga. Daman Ganga, Daroda, there are tributaries to it, but this was the Daman
Right.
Ganga. And he withdrew to a place called Khanvel, where the police chowki was on a hill, because he thought he could take a position there and check on all sides and not permit anybody to take him by surprise. When he was retreating, the Wadlis got news of it. And under Godavari Bai and under the United Goans, they challenged him to battle. Now, they were firing from one side of the river, and this guy was camped on the other side of the river while retreating. But see, you have to appreciate that the Wadlis were dominated for so centuries by these people. So it is not as if they were really bursting with courage. Somewhere along the line, they had been motivated by Godavari Bai to come out and fight. But the Wadlis were scared of the Portuguese, and the Portuguese thought nothing of the Wadlis. They thought of them as mere animals. Therefore, this guy set up 5 machine guns on this side of the river and fired at random. Net result was many of the Wadlis died. And when they died, they got scared, they disbanded and went back to their respective villages. So the communist resistance actually ended there before Khanvel was liberated finally in August.
Mhm.
Does that answer the question?
Well, I think you've answered the question in a lot of detail. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
Sunena has put in another comment. She's the one who asked about humanizing characters, huh? She says the question was more in context of your first book, In the Footsteps of Rama. Huh?
Oh, oh, oh.
So,
There
would you
are a
like
lot
to?
of characters who, yes, yes, there are a lot of characters who come in and go out, because In the Footsteps of Ram is a travelogue. It is about my journey from Ayodhya to Sri Lanka and back, going to all the places where Prabhu Sri Ram went during his Vanvas. And there's a parallel track of the Ramayana running with it. So every place we would go to, it would be my experiences of that place and the local stories of that. And then the Ramayana accordingly moved as I moved to Sri Lanka and came back. Yes, there was a great deal of character creation there, and that is what I think kept the book interesting. So all the people I was looking for odd characters, like all the Panditjis who were on the way. Some people tried to extract money from me. There was a particular Panditji who was really big fat with his mustache. He kept twirling his mustache like a dacoit. Now, such details I had captured, and a lot of them actually populate the book, which make the book more relatable and more connectable. There, yes, I've tried to take attribute motives to them. I have tried to build up the characters. I've tried to describe them and make them as visual as possible. In this book, that was not done.
But then the challenge was how to make a history book interesting, how to make a history book read like a story. How did you do that? We're coming back to
My
the same
my
point.
Karthika's uh, Karthika's observation was that her biggest challenge was to keep the storyteller out of the history book. Because I
Mm-hmm.
am fundamentally a guy who likes to tell a lot of stories, and you know that, Manju. Even when we talk, I'm always about यहाँ से ये हो गया, वहाँ से वो हो गया type. So my natural storytelling abilities took over the book, and I think the bigger challenge was uh, not how to make it interesting. The bigger challenge for Kartika and my editor Sanjana was to make sure that there's less of storytelling and more of history in it. I think it is my natural style. It's the way I speak. It's you see, it's not about uh, what you are writing. It's about how you are writing it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have small chapters, shorter sentences, stronger words. Now these are things which go on to make the whole scene more visual. And my
Mm-hmm.
style of writing is visual. And the biggest compliment I've ever fished and got was that ऐसे लग रहा था जैसे सब हमारी आंख के सामने चल रहा है. So that is only a matter of style. That is how I speak. I always speak out my sentences before I write them because I want every sentence in the book to sound like I was speaking to the people who are reading it. And
Right,
I
right.
think that is where the visual element comes in. And I've tried to make it as every chowki, for instance, if a chowki was attacked, then how were the windows? How were the doors? How were they broken
Mm-hmm.
in? How big was the chowki? I've tried to describe it in as much detail as possible. And this is from actual observation, not from memory, not from creation of character.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, I think it became more readable. We
Something
tried to
that you
keep the
left
chapter
out.
short.
Is there
Yeah.
something that you left out? Is there something that you could not research while you were working on this book?
No, not really. Not really. The challenge was not
And
leaving something out. The challenge was I had so many facts available that I had to actually put them on a linear timeline because the book, after all,
Mhm.
has to go from beginning to end. It cannot be
Yeah, yeah.
six books going parallelly to each other like a Puran or something where
Mhm.
multiple stories are going on at the same time. So the challenge was putting all this together in a linear format, cross-checking each reference with everybody else's. There are cases, mind you, many cases in this case. As a part of research methodology, you may like to consider that, which is that almost everybody was overstating their role in it. So all those people who thought I was this great savior, who had come to make sure that their story went into the public place, became sworn enemies the moment the book came out. Because हमने ऐसे तो बुला ही नहीं था. So what I did was that I actually took a given battle, for instance. One person might claim that there were 29 people there, another claimed that there were 23, and still another said we started as 12, and by the time it
Mhm.
reaches point X, there are 30. अरे बाकी कहाँ से आ गए भाई? So I actually made charts in which I said X says 29, Y says 23, Z says 30. Where did the 12 come from? So I traced them backwards, trying to find out references to where they had come from. And by that kind of cross checking, whatever met the standard that at least three people had independently said the same thing. I only took those things into the book. So
Okay.
it's been quite a challenge. It's been quite a challenge. But it was fun, and I'm sure it communicates in the book.
There is a certain Chatterjee who's asking, how would you like the research in the book to be carried forward?
I guess each part of the battle can be carried forward in the sense that the battle about the which the Wadlis waged in the end in Khanvel, where the Wadlis also came to help these 23 guys. Because when this police, this army of 175 people took up position on top of a hill, and there were only 20 people with rifles following them and trying to beat them out. There was no way they could have beaten them. Again, because they had the disadvantage of being at a lower end and fully visible, whereas the army of the Portuguese were not visible at all. So they went from village to village amongst the Warlis and told them
Mhm.
कि एक बार आप हार के आ गए हो टाइप लेकिन अगर आप आज मौका चूक जाओगे तो जिंदगी भर ये लोग आपकी छाती पे बैठे रहेंगे। हम तो मर जाएंगे, लेकिन आपकी स्लेवरी खत्म होने वाली नहीं है। सो एक बार और हिम्मत करो, कम आउट एंड लेट्स अटैक देम टुगेदर। So these people came out of their villages again. There is a character called Jetru Ben Goom, who was a kind of leader of the tribals. And she was a very, very dynamic lady. So one person from this group and Jetru Ben went on horseback from village to village getting people out. And they joined them. So there were about 100 Worleys also helping them out this time. And they knew all the vantage points from where you could fire into the police station. So they occupied vantage points on all sides and shot into the police station. And finally scared those people so much that they agreed to surrender. Now, this is one aspect which has not been exploited, written about at all. And I have been able to only get what came out of the verbal reports of the Warlis who had fought in it. So maybe this is one part that I would like to take further as to what was the role of the Warlis in it, how did they contribute, and what happened. This is one thing. And what needs more research is also what happened after the liberation. That is something that needs to be gone into in greater detail. Now, this liberation took place in 54. And the moment the liberation happened on the 11th of August 54, Khanvale was taken and the area was Portuguese free. The boys who had attacked said, "We want to go back. We came for a specific purpose. We have done that. We want to go back. We don't want to stay here." So they got hold of the sarpanches of the local villages and formed a Varishta Panchayat. That Varishta Panchayat petitioned the Indian government to take them over. And the Indian government refused, saying, "Hum nahi lenge."
Mhm.
Because they said that this has been liberated by violent means and we don't think we want to enter into this because of fears of NATO. So then this whole thing, this whole area of Dadra and Nagar Haveli actually functioned as an independent country for 7 years. Those 72 villages elected sarpanches who elected a Varishta Panchayat who was held by an administrator and held by a police chief. And they ran it like a country with their own currency, their own postage, their own roads, everything, all their government departments, their own revenue collection method. And all this went on for 7 years because meanwhile the Portuguese went to the World Court and they wanted the right uh, to send their forces through Indian territory to take back what they said had been taken over by ruffians and dacoits. So this case went on for 7 years. And during these 7 years, this area remained independent. Finally, the court ruled in India's favor against the Portuguese, and no NATO country came to help them out. Therefore, the Indian army went into Goa and liberated Goa, Daman and Diu. And that is when, a little before the liberation of Goa, Daman and Diu, these territories were taken back into India. During this period, schools were built, roads were built, land reforms were initiated. So many good things happened as an independent country. But simultaneously, they kept petitioning India, कि हमें ले लो यार, हमको independent नहीं रहना. Now, who does that? So this part of the story, maybe I would like to research more in detail at a subsequent date, or I think more work should be done on it as to what happened in those 7 years. How did they run such a successful government? Maybe it needs to be
Right.
researched.
There are two more questions before we wind up. One comes from Trinidad. We have a person who's joined in from Trinidad, and she's asking, just 1 minute. How does your present work fit into this larger Hindu resurgence of history rewriting taking place presently? Or how does it deviate from it?
It is neither. It is value neutral as far as Hindu revivalism or whatever you choose to call it happens. See, there is a lovely book by Pawan Verma called The Great Hindu Civilization. I think all of us ought to read it. One of the arguments he makes is that just because something can show the Hindus or the Hindu right having done something correctly in a good light, should we therefore not report it because we are likely to get aligned to the current Hindu right or to the extreme Hindu right? Should we actually ignore history just because by speaking about it, we will get branded as the current right, which we may or may not agree with it. Now, that is obviously not correct. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm value neutral. Yes, the RSS played a major role in it. One of the groups was the RSS-led group. They believed in the fundamentals of Hindu Rashtra. They believed in Savarkar, and I've reported it as such. So, therefore, it is value neutral reporting about the contribution of the right, the contribution of the left, and the contribution of the centrist, the Azad Gomantak Dal. All three were involved. And even the people who fought in it told me later on, when the book was launched, I had called one of the freedom fighters, the one who had met me initially, Arvind Kaka. He came to launch the book. And he said that even I did not know as many things about this struggle as Neelesh does now. And I
Wow.
am for the first time aware of the larger picture of the whole struggle, in which how the
Mhm.
other pieces of the jigsaw fitted into it. That was my contribution. It has nothing to do with right or left or center or top or bottom or anything else. It's value
But that
neutral.
is some achievement, really. And Debarati from Kolkata says that she's reminded of the 1985 film Sham Benegal's film Trikal about Goa. And she hopes that your work also inspires a classic like that. And there
Thank
is
you very
one
much.
more question that has come in about the challenges that you faced, retelling history as objectively as possible. I think you've already been talking about it.
I
And
talked about
then
it.
what do we expect from you next? Now, while you're answering this, I would request everybody who's listening in to switch on their videos so that you have a look at, all the faces behind the scenes. Huh? Meanwhile, you
Right.
can tell us what you're working on next.
What is coming out in the month of February itself is a book called Akashvani, A Century of Stories. This is a book with HarperCollins, in which I have uh, again created written out the history of radio in India and what role it has played in our lives and how it has evolved over time, and also taken a look at it, how radio is going forward. It's a tribute to my father, who was an All India radio staffer for all his life. So in a way, हमने radio का नमक खाया है. So it was an attempt to repay radio for what it has given to him, through him to us, and also because my first forays into theater and public speaking were on radio. I went on behind the mic for the first time at the age of 6. And since then, everything else I have done, like commentary or public speaking or voiceovers or theater, has come from the radio background. So it was a way of paying back my debts for the radio. It's again a history. However, it's an anecdotal history. It is, in a similar way, a very readable book. And it's something which will surprise many, because most people have written off radio, or they think radio is only FM radio when you are traveling and listening to songs. So it will surprise you that radio is very much alive, very much kicking, and doing a lot of innovative and new things. So that's my next work. And what I'm writing right now is a book meant to be submitted by the end of February. It is again it is about a century of Delhi University, where I've studied. So it is a
Oh
history of
dear.
Delhi University, similarly
Hmm.
written in terms of as an anecdotal history, but there's a lot of more research involved in it, because you're writing about a very radio was a venerable institution too. But again, academia, you have to be very careful when handling academics and academicians. No disrespect intended. So
Yeah.
I'm keeping my fingers
Academicians, yeah.
crossed.
Well, academicians here on the screen and at the back end too.
Yes, true. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to. There's a lot of work going into that, where we are trying to again trace the history by a mixture of uh, research documents, university resolutions, books written on the university, and a mixture of anecdotes of people's interaction with them. For instance, when I write about the tornado that ripped through the university in 1974, 75, around that time, very obviously there's nothing except reporting. There's anecdotes about it. There's not much uh, facts, so to say, available. So there are cases where I've talked about people's interaction with the university, with various factors taking place there. And I've also talked about what has been happening. So that's the book I'm writing currently, which should be out
Wonderful.
sometime by the end of this year.
Nilesh, would you like to say anything to all these young people who are listening into you? Young and younger. Before we wind up, any word of
Uh,
advice?
I do not think I'm competent to give advice, but I wonder if it is advice as an author that you are talking about, or advice as a human being and a person.
Well, whatever you choose.
Yes, if you are wanting to be an author, please write. I whenever I go to literary festivals and other people, I see so many people who want to be authors, and I don't understand. It's like, and say, oh, we are. I so want to be an author. I mean, it's like saying I so want to be pregnant. I'm half pregnant. It doesn't happen that way. You either or you're not. So either you are an author or you're not. So if you are actually interested in becoming an author, please sit down and start writing. And when you write, do two or three things. One, do not write like anybody else, because each author writes from the sum total of his own experience and the people he has interacted with, the situations he has faced, and the things he has read and done. Therefore, evolve your own style. You may be inspired by styles, but do not try to copy. I get a lot of people coming to me and saying, "See, लिख तो दिया है, इसमें थोड़े difficult words डाल दीजिए और हमें बता दीजिए." To me, that makes no sense, because if you don't speak those words, when you write them, they are going to sound unnatural.
That's right.
So evolve your own style. Make sure that you are writing as you are. From my perspective, please write in manners in which what you are writing becomes interesting, so that people read it. Because ultimately, the object of the communication is two-way. There's a teller and there's a receiver. So if the receiver does not receive what you have said, what's the point in writing the book? So make it as
Right.
interesting as possible. And please do not take your readers for granted. Do not make up facts. Do not go into anything, write about things about which you have not researched, and do not lie and fib, because ultimately you will get caught. So have content, have your own original style. And if you have these two things, you have a story that's actually dying to be told. Somewhere deep inside you, you have a story that needs to be told. Please go out and start writing it. There is no other way to becoming an author except writing a book.
Right,
So
right.
go
Yeah.
there and do it. Go there and do it.
Excellent advice, Nilesh. And what I really want everyone to pick up from you is the hard work that you put in. You know, the
That's
back-breaking research, going places, talking to people, and just not giving up, just being very obstinate, as you said. I would like
yes. Yes.
everyone to have that kind of passion.
Thank you. Thank you so much.